Hello and welcome to the new series of Drishti IAS. I am Pooja Dwivedi, and in this segment today we are going to discuss all about humanitarian corridors. This topic is very important from the perspective of prelims, and if we talk about GS Mains papers, these are important from the perspective of GS Mains paper 2 and 4 as well. Let's begin with the news. What is the news? So on 5th of March, humanitarian corridors were to be set up by Russia and Ukraine in the cities of Mariupol and in the city of Volnovakha. But it did not work because there was something of sort that Ukrainian nationalists, according to Russian agency, they actually were inflicting issues with respect to people who were passing through the corridor. So Mariupol, if we talk about 2 lakh people were to be evacuated from Volnovakha, approximately 15,000 people were to be evacuated. But now there have been agreements with respect to setting up humanitarian corridors at the personal request of French president to have humanitarian corridors in Kiev, Kharkiv, Mariupol, Sumy, in order for the ravaged citizens, ravaged people there to get evacuated from their safety, because they have nothing to do with the war, because approximately 2,000 people, more than 2,000 people have died according to Ukrainian agencies by the invasion of Russia in Ukraine. So this is the entire issue. Let's see what are humanitarian corridors. In very simple terms, humanitarian corridors are demilitarized zones, and here specific time and specific transport will be decided by the 2 agencies, by the 2 stakeholders that are involved in the conflict, to let people pass through there. And that can be used to, first thing, demilitarize and agree to. They can be used for providing aid and assistance with respect to relief measures, also letting people pass there, and many other things. So what do we have to keep in mind? Demilitarized zone for a specific period of time, specific length as well as specific day could be there, and the transport, the way of transport, bus, car, truck, whatever has to be used through there will also be decided. And it generally happens that 2 parties will agree. And sometimes it can also happen when 2 parties don't agree. One party can do the evacuation without the concurrence by the other party as well. And as you see, that this was the case with airlift when the Berlin blockade was there in the year 1948-49. Okay. So this was the American airlift during the Berlin blockade by the Soviet Union. So this was through one party. Now, if we talk about the process, who does it? Generally, it is negotiated by the United Nations. Okay. And access to humanitarian corridors is determined by the parties of the conflict. It can be done. Also, sometimes it might happen that not only the parties who are involved or the UN, it can also be provided by local groups, non-governmental organization, but this sometimes doesn't work. But because we do not know when the militarization or the bombing or the shelling of the place could happen, it is better for the civilians to know that it is something that has been designated by both the stakeholders. Okay, so it can be done for providing aid, humanitarian assistance, evacuation. Lack of abuse is there when generally people do not keep the word that is happening with Russia and Ukraine. Generally it doesn't happen, but if it is designated or negotiated, and generally in war, the aggressor, for example, I'm taking Russia over here, of course. So they do not want to be seen as aggressors against the Ukrainians. They are saying that Ukraine and Russian, these are one people, but we want to get rid of the regime over there. So this is the thing. So there can be a lack of abuse with respect to the designated one when the 2 stakeholders are involved. But when local groups or NGOs can do that, they will do that. It might not be that safe. Okay. And UN observers, NGOs and journalists, they can also access that place to make sure that whatever they are reporting is authentic in nature. So these are the many uses of humanitarian corridors. And you can see this map shows us that how much Ukraine does Russia control right now. Now Ukraine has of course, Crimea, which was annexed in 2014, Luhansk and Donetsk. This is the Donbas region, right? Donbas was Donbas region is basically a region which was held by rebel groups in Ukraine. So now that has been declared according to Russia as a separate republic. And Crimea was of course annexed in the year 2014. And Kherson was the major city to fall. If we talk about the Russians, they took hold of Kherson. Now, of course, here we have Sumy. Sumy is also a city which is under siege. Kharkiv, Kherson, and of course, Donetsk and Luhansk. I told you, Mariupol is seeing relentless and incessant bombing. It is not able to recuperate. So you can see in Sumy, then in Mariupol, in Kherson, and Kharkiv and Kiev, we want to have humanitarian corridors for the people to pass to different regions so that they can at least move to those cities. You see that majorly the eastern region of Ukraine is under major conflict, but western ones are not. So for them to move through the corridors to a better place, we need humanitarian regions. Now what is Russia saying? That through these regions it is happening that fuel to the sieged cities and arsenal and military occupation. For example, Ukraine is sending its operational military to the regions which are under siege with the help of humanitarian corridors. That is why bombing is happening. In Kherson, the problem was that in Kherson and Volnovakha, in that region, what are they saying? That because of incessant bombing, even after proper negotiations with respect to humanitarian corridors, this promise is not being kept because it is not safe for the citizens to pass through the humanitarian corridors during the bombardment. So that is the entire issue. And the problem is that Russia wants to have the hold of Kiev. So they are trying to, encircle Kiev. If Kiev falls, Kiev is a major city, the capital of Ukraine, then something is to be expected according to the French President Emmanuel Macron. Okay, moving on, if we talk about the history of humanitarian corridors, the Kinder transport happened. Okay, that started in the year 1934 when roughly 1400 children were evacuated to the United States from the Nazi-held areas. The Jewish children, they were evacuated. Okay, so this was December 1938 to August 1939 during the Second World War. See, this is the entire map that shows you. Now, another thing, in 1992 to 1995, this was also a humanitarian corridor with respect to the siege of Sarajevo in Bosnia. Okay, so remember that. Sarajevo in Bosnia. Alright. And then also with respect to Syria, in 2018, a corridor was established, humanitarian corridor. Okay. So these were the many corridors, humanitarian corridors, which were established to provide proper aid. Now these corridors can also be established with respect to any other disaster, climate change or migration. So proper humanitarian corridors are something that we need to have a proper framework for, because right now, apart from war, we also have other sort of migrants who are moving with respect to certain instances of ethnic cleansing, like it happened in Myanmar with respect to Rohingyas. And these conflict caused migration will increase in the future. So for that, we need proper framework which can be negotiated by many countries which are seeing this kind of displacement. Okay, so this is one of the suggestions. And if we talk about a question, we can look at this question. What do you understand about the humanitarian corridor? Shed a light upon the history of it and also suggest what could be done to make them more effective. And you can write it in 250 words. Okay, so that's it for today. Tomorrow we shall meet again with another segment. Until then, stay updated and thank you so much for watching.